Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and we are on the last of the Immortals tetralogy by Tamora Pierce, and the last book from her Torrid Hole series that I intend to read for this channel. Barring special requests for special events by people who, desperately feel the need to ask me to talk about a thing. That said, those would be special requests for special events and are not something that is in the immediate future. So, The Realms of the Gods is, of course, the grand finale wrap-up to this tetralogy. We have the final showdown with Ozorn, who, after all, was behind the actions of the first two books, was a major player in the third book, and this last one is sort of the grand culmination of everything. In some very interesting ways, I rather suspect that the issue in this book, which is that the gods who are constantly fighting with Usoe, or however that's supposed to be pronounced, the goddess of chaos, the idea, of course, is that most of the great gods represent the concept of order, and Usoe is, the representation of chaos, because, of course, life is a combination of order and chaos. If you have nothing but order, then everything, stultifies and ceases to function because it stops moving, because everything is so orderly that it's dead. But obviously with chaos, then you don't have the ability to get anything done because everything is just a big flailing mess. So obviously you're dealing with this philosophical need to have a balance between the two, and the two things of course naturally constantly exist at odds. And the mythology from in-universe is that at some point someday the Queen of Chaos will eventually manage to win and eat the entire universe. But what happens in this particular book is that she is working with several people, and I'm not certain whether it's knowing or unknowing, in order to get the upper hand. And it is, of course, and she's working with Ozorn, and Ozorn knows that he's working with the goddess of chaos. The most interesting thing about this, of course, is that, as is pointed out both by Daine to him and earlier on in the book, if Usoe wins, she's going to eat everything, and everything descends to chaos, so whatever power Ozorn thinks he's won, he won't have, because everything will be chaos, because you cannot be in control of chaos. That's part of the fundamental definition of chaos. So the whole thing is genuinely perplexing. Just, on a conceptual level of why would anybody do this, but then again, deals with the devil are usually conceptually confusing because, you don't win in a deal with the devil, so what are you doing? Sure, you have deals with the devil, like, cropped up, say, in Supernatural, where you had Bella, who made a deal with the devil because she was, being horrifically abused and just wanted to get out and didn't know what the consequences were, and that's fair. But, when you're talking about I'm making a deal for extra power, it just doesn't seem sensible. And this is one of those, you're so desperate for power you've stopped being sensible sorts of things. But what's very interesting is I suspect, despite the fact that Ozorn is an overarching background nemesis in the first two books and, the villain of the third, I don't think, based on what I've seen, that he actually got tangled with Usoe until effectively after the third book, somewhere between the third and fourth books, because there is nothing in what he's doing to indicate that he had even thought of this, would have even thought of this beforehand. So, the reason for the title, of course, The Realms of the Gods, is because Daine and Numari wind up in the realms of the gods during the course of this book. That early on in the book, basically everybody is attacking Turtle and her allies, and so that's kind of, an all-hands-on-deck thing. And then some creatures nobody has seen before start attacking, and so Daine and Numari get dispatched because Numari is the most powerful mage, and Daine's shapeshifting ability gives her powers to, change from one animal to another that give her abilities that other people don't have, and they're not able to beat the Skinners, but what happens instead is, because it is midsummer's day, the barriers between the realms of the gods and the regular human world are thin, which is fairly traditional in a lot of cultures. The idea that at the two solstices and the two equinoxes that there is a sort of a magical gateway, or at least thinning of the walls at those times, allowing for converse with, the afterlife or what have you. That's fairly, bog standard traditional stuff. At least here in the West. I don't know. Maybe things are different in other non-Western places. But, so they're able to get pulled into the realms of the gods by Daine's mother and father, because it turns out, it was vaguely introduced in the last book that her father was a god, but in this book we get clarification. Daine's mother, one midsummer, one very exciting Bealtaine, wound up sleeping with a god, and thus her daughter Daine is literally half god, is literally a half god, and so we finally meet her father properly, and he is Werin, god of the hunt, and he's kind of a horned god. He's like, a hunter man with deer horns. But they're both but he's a minor god, and Daine's mother, Sarah, has been turned into a goddess, that there was sort of a petition, and she has become a minor variant on the mother goddess to sort of service the territory that she was originally from, because the mother goddess can't literally be everywhere at all times, and so having minor goddesses who deal with stuff like childbirth and so on is really, really helpful in the grand scheme of things. So Daine wakes up in the realms of the gods to find that she and Numari have been dragged away, and that her mother is now a goddess, and her father is in fact the horned god, and they wind up having to go on a quest all the way across the gods' realms, to the Dragonlands, because the dragons apparently live in sort of the same metaphysical space as the gods, because dragons are giant immortal mages with like amazing magical superpowers, who don't particularly like being on, in the regular mortal realm, and have their own space, and can get up to hijinks and actually, combat the regular great gods, should they so choose, which they don't normally because it's not worth anybody's time. But they go trekking to the Dragonlands based on the notion that Daine is raising Skysong the dragon, because in the first book there was a dragon who died and left her kit to Daine's care, and so the dragonling, the baby dragon who they call Kitten, whose proper name is Skysong, is being raised by Daine and whoever else she has at hand. And so they're hoping to basically apply as, Kitten's adoptive parents to get sent back so that they can, if nothing else, take care of Kitten. And so they go on a very exciting adventure with a duck-billed platypus and Daine's badger friend, the god of all duck-billed platypuses, who insists on being called a duck mole, because reasons. I'm not sure whether it's that Tamora Pierce felt that duck-billed platypus isn't a good enough name or is too human a name or whatever, but he's Broadfoot is a duck mole. I don't really know why, because platypuses aren't very mole-like. They're more like duck beavers, but whatever. So you have that, and they go trekking across, and they wind up talking to dragons, and they have lots and lots of exciting adventures, and Daine and Numari get into a romantic thing, which is one of those. I think it works very well in the book. I think Tamora Pierce justifies it and gives due consideration to the fact that Numari is significantly older than Daine, and he has known her since she was much, much younger. And, perhaps they shouldn't be in a romantic thing, but it hasn't come up until this book that there's any sort of romance, and Daine is now 16, which is at least old enough that you can look at a romance and not say that's getting weird. And like I said, there is due consideration and discussion given to the question of, sure, romance, love, sex, whatever, but, do they really want to enter into this when at some point he may look over and want a mature woman, and she may look over and want somebody who's her own age and actually young enough to, keep up with her, and so on and so forth. We do find out in The Protector of the Small tetralogy that they did wind up getting together, but it was clearly a lengthy process, which is, it's fine. At the end of the book, Numari seems to be pushing real hard for the marriage thing, but I also feel that at the end of the book, Numari is entirely punch drunk, based on massive, hard-fought battle to the death with Inar Hadensra, the Scanran mage, and, his judgment may not be the greatest at that specific moment in time. In the end, Daine gets to be the one who defeats the former Emperor Ozorn, and it is a really, really well-done, hard-fought battle that goes right down to the wire, and really allows Daine, sort of allows the use of the full scope of Daine's abilities to show how it can make her into an equal competent with whoever she winds up being. It's really very, very interesting. This idea of Daine saying for the first time, I'm going to, not just as I have sometimes done, temporarily change my eyes to, hawk eyes to see better, or ears to bat ears to hear better, but that she's literally saying, I'm going to take this part of this bird and that part of that bird and make a better bird in order to chase Ozorn down better. And when she gets into a fight, she's, taking on bits and pieces of other animals to deal with that fight. And it's very, very interestingly done, and it is something that allows her to sort of come out on top in that battle, along with a moment that, really, really is wonderful, that, we get down to the end and she's out of magic and Ozorn is out of magic, but, he's still a Stormwing physically, which means he still has all of those razor-sharp wings, and Daine has nothing and no weapons except for the claw that the Badger gave her in the first book. And it's a wonderful callback to that first moment in the first book, because yes, that claw has come up repeatedly throughout this series, as the Badger's way of tracking her down, as just, the only thing that stays with her when she transforms, and so on and so forth. But it sort of brings everything right back around full circle to her first magic friend, and I think it works really, really well. And so that's all I have to say, and I will see you all next week.